The Urbanist is brought to you in association with the Department of Culture and Tourism, Abu Dhabi. Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi is a beacon of hope and inspiration. A catalyst to spark growth and collaboration with museums and experiences, where art and science and nature and technology coexist.
The belief of Abu Dhabi that culture is the backbone of our society.
Stay tuned for a special episode of the show, in which you can hear His Excellency Mohammed Khalifa Al Mubarak explain exactly why and how Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi is the perfect place to collaborate, create and innovate. Saadiyat Cultural District Abu Dhabi, proud partner of The Urbanist on Monocle Radio.
New York is awash with cultural touchpoints, being one of the global centres for creatives to gather throughout the decades. The Algonquin Hotel on West 44th Street is one such landmark, a location where literary luminaries would gather for discussion around one particular table in its famous Blue Bar. You're listening to Tall Stories, a Monocle production brought to you by the team behind The Urbanist. I'm Ajutak. In this episode, Paul Logothetis visits one of New York City's oldest working hotels, which spawned the famous Algonquin Round Table, a who's who of American literary elites.
The Blue Bar at New York City's Algonquin Hotel is buzzing most nights. The location on West 44th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues lies near Times Square and the Theater District, making it an easy stroll for locals and tourists alike, who make up the loyal clientele. The contemporary buzz inside the Blue Bar is no new trend either. The Algonquin has long attracted visitors due to a rich history that touches on a number of important times. From women's suffrage to the Roaring Twenties and the Jazz Age, Prohibition, there's a resident feline living here too. And, perhaps most importantly, this is where a certain literary circle that has loomed large and influenced American cultural history was born. You could say the Algonquin Hotel is to New York City literature and mythology what CBGB's is to punk rock music. It is where some of the most famous early 21st century writers, actors, poets, and journalists all found themselves congregating. This meeting of minds would spawn the famed Algonquin Round Table, which was also known as the Vicious Circle, and it was a who's who of New York literary elites, which revolved around 15 key personalities. From Broadway stars to newspaper hacks, the Algonquin Round Table included the likes of Dorothy Parker, James Thurber, Harpo Marx, and George S. Kaufman. These prominent members of high society met here daily at the hotel for a decade from 1919 for their famous 2-hour-plus lunches that initially began as a roast of New York Times editor Alexander Woolcott before they morphed into a decade-long ritual. Parker, whose writings appeared in Vogue, Vanity Fair, and The New Yorker, was one of the most famous residents of the hotel. Her caustic, cynical wit positioned her as one of the leading female voices of the 1920s. The Vicious Circle played a significant role in that, with Parker saying of her days living here, "The first thing I do in the morning is brush my teeth and sharpen my tongue." Historian Kevin Fitzpatrick, who authored the book about the Algonquin Round Table, says that, ironically, Parker ultimately hated being seen as the poster girl for the group. These daily lunches were as lively as many of the personalities were at the start of promising careers, meeting daily from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Once a guest was brought in, they were at liberty to come again. Gate crashes were not allowed. The hotel's location was ideal for supplying newspaper gossip columns with daily fodder, with the headquarters of so many broadsheets and magazines nearby, including Vanity Fair, Condé Nast, and the New Yorker magazine, which was born out of one of these roundtable lunches. At the Algonquin, some writers were given room and board in exchange for signed first edition copies of their work. Some of those are still on display in the hotel's second-floor conference rooms, which also function as informal libraries. Many of the writers and members of the Round Table had fought in World War I and had roots in Paris and Europe. But, unlike Ernest Hemingway and other writers of the period, they returned home and rooted themselves in New York City and the Algonquin. Today, the walls are decorated with original pictures and magazine covers that herald us back to the post-war period in the Roaring Twenties, when the Algonquin was not only a literary hotspot, but also a place where women and travelers of color could rent a room, which was not always an easy feat at that time. The Algonquin had always been at the forefront of avant-garde, says General Manager Willis Lowhead.
The Algonquin has a legendary literary culture, a legendary cocktail culture. And then if you go a little bit deeper, it has a legendary culture for being the first property to permit solo traveling women. So what spins off of that is a tremendous amount of jazz performers. So then it becomes a haunt of Ella Fitzgerald, of Nina Simone, of a tight-knit group of people that are performing perhaps elsewhere in the city, in the different clubs, but who couldn't travel solo and certainly couldn't check into a hotel on their own. So it kind of opened up a freedom that didn't exist at the time, and that resonates, has such a ripple effect.
The hotel's continued to remain a potent gathering place ever since, with regulars over the years including writers like Norman Mailer and musicians such as Elvis Costello, Burt Bacharach, and Lou Reed, who like to nip in for a drink at the famed Blue Bar. The bar earned that moniker from stage actor John Barrymore, who suggested blue lighting because it showed off actors at their best on the stage. It was Barrymore who also gave the hotel's cat Hamlet its name, wanting to ensure an ode to the stage. The tradition of keeping a resident feline goes back nearly a century, since Barrymore took in an alley cat to make it hotel royalty. Hamlet VIII is the 13th such resident, with female kitties taking the name Matilda. Hamlet has his own children's book and popular Instagram account, and can often be found perched on the front desk. The hotel hosts traditional events that you would expect considering its history, such as a salute to the Rat Pack, but there are also Rockettes-inspired dancers and Santa Christmas Carol drag shows that jive with the forward-thinking clientele. No doubt such laughs would have been a hit with the Vicious Circle, who were commemorated and on display on a back wall through a famed portrait painted by Maxfield Parrish. Willis, a film school graduate and former executive chef who has worked for the likes of Hollywood stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger, embraces the hotel's historic legacy as he takes it forward by feeding the soul of the property.
You don't need to be historically accurate to be historically relevant. I don't need to bring back old matchbooks to have a nod to the past, to have an energy. And that's really the fissure, the break that I wanted to bridge. I think in the past, many old hotels, they just really go for accuracy rather than energy. That's really what I'm trying to do here, is not go for costumed authenticity, but re-enliven an energy with a nod to the past, and a respect for the history.
Tall Stories is a Monocle production from the team behind The Urbanist. This episode was written by Paul Logothetis and produced and edited by David Stevens. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive new episodes every week. I'm Andrew Tuck. Goodbye. Thank you for listening, City Lovers.